Welcome to Proudly Jewish, conversations on Israel and Jewish identity. Many of you are not first-time participants, and you know that I started this as a Zoom session for my congregation in Portland, Congregation Neveh Shalom, as a response to October 7th, to the massacre of October 7th, so that we could talk and deal with it from various angles, various issues. And today, I'm honored to have as our very special guest, Gil Hoffman, the Executive Director of Honest Reporting. As I said, October 7th was the worst massacre of Jews since the Holocaust, both in terms of scale and in terms of how heinous the atrocities were. Yet the news has generally been, in my view, and Gil can correct me if I'm mistaken, has generally been unsympathetic to Israel. I've seen countless interviews in which a news anchor is speaking to an Israeli, and the tone is almost belligerent, I would say. I want to start by showing a video from Honest Reporting, and then we'll get Gil to respond to that and begin the interview there.
Was Gaza an open-air prison or a gem of cultural riches? Even before Hamas started this war on October 7th, Gaza was described as the world's largest open-air prison, and sometimes even compared to Nazi concentration camps. But now, protesters criticizing Israel's bombardment of Gaza and the tragic consequences of war are claiming that, before October 7th, Gaza was beautiful and vibrant. Now, I don't know about you, but something is just not adding up. How is it that Gaza was both an open-air prison, comparable to Auschwitz, and a paradise? The truth is that Gaza was never an open-air prison, unless you consider beach resorts, luxury malls, and even mansions characteristics of an open-air prison. This is how Gaza's Hamas-appointed mayor described some of the city. To be clear, life in Gaza in the past 2 decades has been difficult, so much so that Palestinians have risked it all to protest against the repressive Hamas regime. But Gaza couldn't have been heaven and Auschwitz at the same time. It's almost like pro-Palestinian activists always shift the narrative to paint Israel as the bad guy, instead of blaming Hamas.
So, Gil, welcome to Proudly Jewish. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure being with you, Cantor.
We just saw this video about Gaza being an open-air prison, and this Honest Reporting piece that challenges that claim. So what role did the media have to play in this narrative that Gaza was an open-air prison, and what are the ramifications of such claim?
Well, first of all, regarding what you said in your intro, we got good press on October 7th. We had the empathy of the world when we were attacked, at least on that day and the following day, when the newspapers around the world led with pictures of young Israelis being dragged into Gaza against their will by the Hamas infiltrators. And then we still got some good press when Israel was purposely hesitant to go into Gaza. It's hard to even remember now, but we didn't go in at the beginning. And then the more damage that there is on the other side, the world's sympathy and empathy switches, especially when the world is being given numbers that don't make sense coming out of Gaza. And there are, as this video pointed out, alternative narratives about what Gaza is and was, and they're trying to make Israel look bad from two sides at the same time while being contradictory. Of course, every place has good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. I just had a worker come back from 3 months in Gaza, or since the infiltration, was in the army since October 7th. And he said that at one point his unit received an intelligence warning that right by them, there was a tunnel shaft that they had to be looking into. And they went there very carefully and discovered that it was the engine for a swimming pool in a villa there in Gaza. That is what they had detected.
Wow.
So, Gaza isn't always what people think.
Thanks, Gil. You answered I was going to ask you about that October 7th, right? What was there any sympathy? And you said there was on the day of October 7th. Uh, you know, it seemed to me that the narrative shifted immediately. And that's my perspective. I could be wrong, but I know that the rallies, anecdotally, that's how I felt. I saw that from social media. I saw it on people who were friends, or former friends, where they were bracing themselves for what Israel might do instead of focusing on what actually happened, and instead of expressing outrage. Um, what happened with the media in terms of, did coverage turn hostile right away, or did it wait until the war began? Because there was a period of time, between October 8th and when Israel launched a full, a ground operation.
Well, already midday on October 7th, the New York Times shifted its headlines online from Israel being invaded and attacked to Gaza and Israel go to war after militants launch attacks. So already an equivalency.
Yeah.
Israel didn't get to keep its victimhood for more than a few hours in a world of intersectionality where victimhood is actually a powerful weapon. We are the underdog. We are the most discriminated against minority in the United States. And people have forgotten that and wrongly attributed us as being privileged. We are the underdog in a region of 22 Arab countries and 57 Muslim countries. And we were invaded, as you said, in the worst attack since the Holocaust. We deserve to have the world's sympathy. And we lost it pretty darn quick. And there's all kinds of incorrect reporting about Hamas and who they are from day one that's downplayed them and tried to make them look somehow legitimate, or if they're aiming for freedom or a two-state solution. They don't believe in either of those things. They believe in wiping Jews off the map, whether they live in Portland or Petah Tikva.
Wow. The it changed pretty darn quick, you said. Now, is that through any fault of our own? And I'm extending our, I'm not an Israeli citizen, but this affects Jews. So I've heard many through the years, not just this year, people saying, "Oh, Israel isn't so great at hasbara. We're not good at PR." Is is this on Israel, or is this on the media?
We're always going to be under scrutiny. We're the home beat of every local newspaper around the world and every media outlet. They all care about what's going on here. And we know that. We know that we have to be more careful than any other army in the world. We can't carpet bomb in the way that America and England have done in their wars. We've done more to minimize civilian deaths than any army in the history of mankind on this earth. And I personally think that the IDF has done a better job presenting who we are and what we've done than in any army before. We have a spokesman of the army, and Daniel Hagari, who speaks English and has made a point to give regular briefings in English. They put out statements in English regularly with maps and videos and subtitles because they understand that winning on the media battlefield is the key to winning on the military battlefield. And I personally, I don't think that we'd have an 104-day war if Israel had done worse PR. That's where the pressure comes from. It comes from the media putting pressure on the administration in Washington and other world leaders to pressure Israel. And they're not a place to be doing that, because the world media covering this war has made so many mistakes and look bad. And because Israel has done a relatively better job than before in presenting its case in a very, very justified war.
You mentioned mistakes, and you also mentioned, how Israel's done a good job in terms of presenting its case. I've been really impressed with Conricus in terms of the
Sure.
IDF spokesman, and Alon Levy, who I want to show a clip of him a little later on if
They're
there's a chance.
both
Um,
good friends.
I'm sorry.
You're both
Both
good friends.
both good friends. Wonderful to hear. So regarding the mistakes, one glaring one that happened early on in the first month, in mid-October, was the story of the bombing of the hospital in Al-Ahli, the Al-Ahli Arab hospital in Gaza. The story was incendiary and spread fast, right? Israel, the report was, had bombed a hospital, and there were at least 500 innocent people who had been killed. And I remember getting at least one, I think there were two congregants who were texting me and going, what about this? What do we say about this? Because, how could we be so awful? In other words, that's not what they said, but that was the suggestion. And it turns out the entire story was false. Can you elaborate and tell us about that? How they got it wrong?
The Hamas overthrew in 2007 the Palestinian Authority. They didn't come to power by an election. They literally came to power by taking Abbas's people and throwing them off of buildings to the floor. And so any government information coming from Gaza comes from Hamas, from what's recognized around the world as a terror organization. They don't know how to count people. And I don't know why Gaza is the only place in the world where media really believes that within half an hour they'll know how many people are dead. In Miami, there was a building that came down. It took weeks for people to find out, and that how many people perished in that tragedy. That's America, and here the world media was believing without a shred of evidence that 500 people, mostly women and children. Okay, Sky News in England always has to be more anti-Israel than everybody else, so they reported 800. Um, and it was hard for Israel to get the media to change their story, even after they had provided solid proof that it was the hospital's parking lot that had been hit by an errant rocket fired by Islamic Jihad. The fact that it took 4 hours to present that solid proof is 4 hours too many, because I wish it could have taken 4 seconds. But it in the past had taken 4 weeks, even 4 months. The IDF really did come a long way. And I was impressed. But of course, in Israel, it was the middle of the night. You're in Portland. You had to deal with it more of a problem than the media over here. But 4 hours in the middle of the night is not that bad. You had the chief of staff of the army and the commander of the Air Force together involved. That never happened before. It used to be a long process where, like in May 2021, Israel hit a tower that CNN and Al Jazeera were working out of, and it looked terrible around the world. It took a very long time for Israel to reveal to the world that it was a cyber tower of Hamas that was jamming the Iron Dome and taking it down and saved lives.
But the damage is done, right? In some ways, like I remember this. I wanted to tell this wonderful story, parable, and I can't remember. A congregant in Hamilton, Ontario, said the story about how if you want to fix something, first take the feathers of a pillow, tear the pillow open, throw it out like that. Now collect all the feathers. It's like the feathers have gone, right? They've gone in the wind. It's now in the ether. So I think there's a lot of praise to go to Israel for having responded to it well. But what do you say to that? Like, is the damage done?
Yes, and to use, they're very refined in Hamilton. I encourage people to go there. But I was in New Orleans at the time on a speaking tour, and the phrase that was used there was, "You can't get the toothpaste back into the tube." Um,
Right.
so that's something maybe people can relate to better than pillows with feathers. But even though that's true. And we did look bad, and there are still media outlets today reporting wrongly what that happened with that hospital. I think the media looked worse in retrospect, and that incident was one that really, really tarred and feathered, if we're going to use feather analogies, the media as being completely untrustworthy, and made people doubt reports from Gaza since then. And they should, because Gaza is not a democracy. Gaza is run by a terror organization, and there's no freedom of the press, and no reports coming from there can be trusted.
Now, about that, and you mentioned this just a few minutes ago. When you talked about the overthrow of the PA and what kind of government Hamas is, and the information emanating from there. I have found it bewildering that anyone would accept news coming out of Gaza at face value. You have to know, and certainly the legacy media has to know that Hamas is not a democracy, does not have freedom of the press, and any information, I would imagine, and you're the expert, but I would imagine that the information coming out of there has to be filtered. If it's going to be allowed out, it has to be filtered through Hamas. So why have the larger media sources been trusting of any information emanating from Hamas-ruled Gaza?
They want to be balanced. They want to present both sides, and so they always say the IDF says 1,200 people were killed on that day, and Hamas says some outrageous number that have been killed since then. But this is asymmetrical warfare. It doesn't work that way when a democracy is attacked by a terrorist organization. And so lately, what we've had is the IDF has been bringing in journalists together to show them important things in Gaza, because you can't just go into Gaza. Israel, in 2014, there was a war. We let them just go in, and it's not safe. We don't want more Shireen Abu Aklehs. There have been enough journalists that have been killed by mistake, and it's very important to Israel that the world knows that we don't target journalists, and we're doing a lot to protect them. And so they're embedding journalists that come in. It happened this week with Nick Robertson, who's the foreign editor of CNN International, really great reporter. He went into a tunnel, deep, deep, deep into a tunnel. And the disclaimer that ran with the report, whether it was online or a broadcast on the network, was that his footage had to be submitted to the IDF for security reasons, but the final version was edited by CNN, and they didn't have to, that they retained their full editorial control, which is totally legitimate for them to do. But every report from Gaza needs a disclaimer too,
Right.
that this came from a place controlled by a terrorist organization, and no, CNN doesn't have control. Those working there want to please Hamas because they want to stay alive.
Now, we assume over here on the outside, when we watch the news, that we're being given information by people who know better than us, by experts. These reporters know what they're doing. And I read somewhere that may not be the case. That can you speak to that? How knowledgeable are these journalists who are on the ground reporting from Israel/Gaza? What's their expertise?
If you're getting your news from Israeli news sources like the Jerusalem Post and Times of Israel, then you're dealing with people that have been getting information from the Israeli army and from other sides for decades. You can trust them, but parachute journalists that have come in from around the world, they can't claim to understand the depth of the conflict. Though some of them have done extremely well, and we have a debt of gratitude to Anderson Cooper, for instance, who's really proved himself a mensch. But because Israel's not allowing journalists to go freely into Gaza, they're relying on stringers, on ordinary Gazans with a camera. And they obviously have an agenda, and there's no Walter Cronkite among them. And that's even more reason to be careful. I mean, we've revealed in Honest Reporting stringers who are close friends with Yahya Sinwar, and the head of Hamas, and one got visited in the hospital by Khalid Mashal, one of the billionaire former heads of Hamas, basically, who lives in Qatar.
I saw
And
that picture. There's a
yeah,
picture on Instagram, I think, where he's like kissing the reporter's hand or something like this, right there. Chummy.
I'm glad you're on our Instagram. If you know, I don't know if you can do it here. Cantor, take a poll here. How many
Okay,
of the people here are on Facebook? How
uh,
many are on? Can you do like can people raise hands?
let's do it that way because I can't do it professionally. Can we
How
see
many
everybody?
people are on Facebook? How many people are on X, formerly known as Twitter, or used to be before Elon messed it up? How many people are on Instagram because they want to see their grandchildren? How many people are on TikTok because their grandkids put it on their phone? How many people are on Snapchat? I'm not on that one. How there's Telegram. Hamas is on that one. That's good to get information on Hamas. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn counts. So we've got people here on LinkedIn. I see. LinkedIn has become much more social media than it's ever been lately. So they're all part of the fight for Israel on the media battlefield. Counter, I'm sure they're posting things that are helpful, sharing things that are put out by Israel, by the IDF, by Stand With Us, and by Honest Reporting, and all the organizations that are trying to put out the truth.
It's interesting. A lot anecdotally, I feel that most of my congregants are on Facebook, but not on Instagram, not on TikTok. Not that I'm on TikTok. I'm on Instagram, but
You got to be on TikTok, Cantor.
okay,
You share
fine.
your beautiful voice for the younger generation.
But I worry about it because of its. I'll look into it. Thank you, though. I appreciate that. Um, Now, regarding what Honest Reporting does, I remember what media, I remember seeing some media bias during the first Intifada, right? In other words, this didn't start October 7th, what we're seeing with the skewed reporting. And I remember noticing as I was watching the news, and I would watch the news regularly, but certainly during the Intifada, I was, watching the news carefully, and it hit me that very often the news reporters with the camera were with the Palestinian stone throwers and agitators before when it was quiet, just sort of waiting there, and all of a sudden the IDF jeeps or whoever would come in, and there would be an altercation. And I remember going, how did they know? How did the reporters know to be there at that time before the IDF knew to be there at that time? And it occurred to me, well, there's some sort of media bias, and it started before October 7th. Now, I remember that there was one glaring story that was outrageous at all fronts. First of all, when it came out, it's like, oh, this looks just awful about what Israel has done. And then Honest Reporting broke what the truth was. It was like the first, and I think this is what Honest Reporting calls what started it all for you. Can you
Yeah.
speak about that moment and in a way to tell us, this didn't start October 7th, this narrative of the this media bias towards Israel.
So I'm going to go all the way back,
Okay.
Cantor. The first incident of anti-Semitism happened with the first Jew when Abraham was thrown into a furnace. Okay, and it hasn't gotten much better since then. And then the media reported about God showing disproportionate force by that flood that destroyed the world. And it still, but going back 2000, September 2000, there was a kid who got out of a taxi in an Arab neighborhood and immediately got attacked by an Arab mob. And his picture ran in the New York Times, and they said that he's an Arab kid and that he got roughed up by the Israeli army on the Temple Mount. And then his father saw the picture and he said, that's my son. His name is Tuvia. He's Jewish. And that soldier saved his life.
Wow.
and there's no gas station on the Temple Mount. And that led to a group of people on email getting together. They had Yahoo groups at the time, people might remember. And then it led to a website. And I've just been with the team. I took over in July of 2022. And since then, we've just gotten a lot more aggressive. Um, we've made sure to be a force to be reckoned with. We by shifting a lot of what we do to social media where the young people are. Um, and in 2022, 4 million people saw our content on social media. In 2023, it was 123 million.
Wow.
4 million to 123 million, of which 45% are under 25 and 90% are under 45. So we are really doing what we can to get out of our echo chamber.
Wow. Regarding that Tuvia moment,
Yeah.
how could they get it so wrong? What I mean by that is it seems implausible that it was a goof. Oops. The identity is wrong, the location is wrong, the action is wrong. Is there any, I mean, it seems that way, but is there any evidence or can we know anything about why that happened?
I wasn't around back then,
Okay,
so I don't know. Though I know my organization, every time there's a big anniversary, Tuvia and the guy who saved him come together. He's not a lawyer,
sure.
Tuvia,
Okay.
in Modi'in, but the soldier who saved him was Druze. He wasn't even Jewish.
Wow.
So actually, they said the kid was not Jewish, and it was the soldier who wasn't Jewish, just made it even more wrong. But as a journalist, I truly believe that they all want to get the facts right, that there's very few have some anti-Semitism and bias. It's just that the field of journalism has gotten a lot harder over the last 20, 30 years. I'm old enough to remember calling in a story at a payphone. Um, and going to press conferences at 10 o'clock in the morning with an 8 p.m. deadline and starting to write my story at 7:30 p.m.
Wow.
Now, if you go to a press conference at 10 o'clock in the morning, your story is leading the website before the press conference is over, and you've live tweeted and you've got pictures on Instagram. It's not as easy to be a journalist as it used to be. And that
Right.
makes mistakes happen.
Okay. Understood. I mentioned before I wanted to see, I'm going to ask a few more questions and then I'd like to address some of the questions that are in the chat. So if you do have questions, please put them in the chat. I'll try my best to get to them. We may not get to all of them, but we'll do our best. I mentioned Alon Levy, and I wanted to show that moment with the Sky News reporter and just talk about that.
I was speaking to a hostage negotiator this morning. He made the comparison between the 50 hostages that Hamas has promised to release, as opposed to the 150 prisoners that are Palestinians that Israel has said that it will release. And he made the comparison between the numbers and the fact that does Israel not think that Palestinian lives are valued as highly as Israeli lives?
That is an astonishing accusation. If we could release one prisoner for every one hostage, we would obviously do that. We are operating in horrific circumstances. We're not choosing to release these prisoners who have blood on their hands. We are talking about people who have been convicted of stabbing and shooting attacks. Notice the question of proportionality doesn't interest Palestinian supporters when they are able to get more of their prisoners out. But really, it is outrageous to suggest that the fact that we are willing to release prisoners who are convicted of terrorism offenses, more of them than we are getting our own innocent children back, somehow suggests that we don't care about Palestinian lives. Really, that's a disgusting accusation.
Well, besides the eyebrow moment, which has become a bit of a meme, here, so honest reporting exposes media bias when media gets it wrong. Here's a moment that I suspect falls under the honest reporting correct me if I'm wrong, the honest reporting mandate, because she didn't get information wrong. She just imbued she put an accusation there and imbued a bias that was not factual, but more, how could you think that? Can you explain a bit of what we saw there, and perhaps what does that say about media bias?
Well, we have 8 different categories of media bias that we look for as we monitor the media around the world constantly. And here you have an interviewer who's jumping to conclusions in a way to hurt Israel that maybe she thought was trying to hurt Israel, and ended up making herself look pathetic, in part because Alon played the game and expressed shock the way that he did. And that's very important that people around the world saw that people around the world saw what we're up against. And there are different ways of fighting back. You have to be very quick on your feet. You know, I've got interviewed by hostile media a lot. I was on Chinese TV this past week. They're actually more hostile to America than than they are to us. But the fact that Alon is that quick is more power to him.
Great. Maybe a couple more questions that I have, and then we'll turn it over. Most American Jews see Israel as part of their Jewish identity. I'm a Canadian Jew, and to me, Israel, Zionism is part of my Jewish identity. It's my ancestral homeland, regardless of politics. The same way an Irish American is happy on St. Patrick's Day, or is just happy to be proud to be Irish, and an Italian American is proud to be an Italian of origin, and is not questioned on the politics of the country or anything like that. It's part of my identity, period. But there are many American Jews that have questionable, that have, I don't want to say questionable, that have difficult relationship regarding Israel, and are either uncertain what to, how they connect to Israel, or just have negative views. Regarding, if you're an American Jew who has little interest in Israel, why should you be concerned by the media bias when it comes to Israel?
Well, unfortunately, anti-Semitism affects people all around the world. We're not safe anywhere, and you can't run away. They figure out who we are. And there's an IRA definition of anti-Semitism, the International Holocaust Remembrance Association, and what they put as part of the definition is singling out the one Jewish state for different treatment than any other country around the world, and blaming your ordinary American or Canadian Jew for the actions of a government that in a country that they may have never visited, just because of their religion. That is classic anti-Semitism, and it affects people all around the world, and especially on college campuses in America. Nobody, just because they have a Jewish name or look stereotypically Jewish or whatever, should have to bear the brunt of decisions made by an Israeli government, no matter who's in power.
I'm going to check a few questions here in the chat and field them. Sherry Horowitz says, interestingly, the Israeli government spokesman Alon Levy issued a challenge to the people attending a pro-Palestine march. Carry the sign, I condemn Hamas for raping Israeli women and girls. And he would donate 10 pounds to the charity of their choice. And no one responded to the challenge. Are they so invested in their philosophy of oppressor/oppressed and intersectionality as to disregard the facts and truth?
Yes, they are. I mean, Sherry, they are convinced of their narrative, and I'm really disappointed. So I really thought when everything that happened that October 7th came out, that it would be a game changer, that would change public opinion among mainstream Americans and Brits, because this was just so obviously evil to infiltrate another country and go from house to house murdering people, and go into a dance festival and rape all you can, and then cut off their heads while you're raping them. That's just so obviously wrong, and yet um, they are so anti-Semitic that they'll be in favor of anything that harms Jewish people. Um, and the most evil and good has been lost, and the world is a scary place because of it.
And Marnie Horish asks, is honest reporting reaching the eyes and ears of people who have linked their hearts to a narrative that is anti-Jew and anti-Israeli?
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, go ahead.
really glad she asked that, because we've really tried. We could have easily just pandered to a base of right-wing Americans in their 60s and 70s, and that would have been very easy. But we know that we need to be having an impact on the future leaders of tomorrow, who don't yet understand that being progressive means being pro-Israel, even if all the facts suggest that. And so that's why we've been so active on Instagram and on TikTok, where the young people are getting their news, for better, for worse, really. And we have to be there. When celebrities say something against Israel, but people are going to their pages because they're pretty or they sing well, we need to have the truth there, responding to them. And that's why, even though Honest Reporting been around dealing with mainstream media for more than 20 years, when I started, I said, no, we're dealing with social media now, because there are plenty of celebrities who people read what they write on their Instagram page a lot more than the Washington Post, you know, um, and that's where we can make an impact, and we are.
That's a remarkably important point that you just made. You know, I, most of my congregation, I don't know. My sense is that they're more, again, more on Facebook than they are on Instagram and on other platforms. But
Especially if you do a really long and don't allow them.
yeah, there you go. But they're not seeing that the conversation on Israel and all these rallies that are happening in the States and in Canada, are the media, social media influencers have often a lot more of an audience than CNN or some other news source. So I'm glad that you're, tackling that to some extent, and trying to. So regarding, Sherry has another question. How is honest reporting different than Memory? I think it's Middle East Media Research Institute or something like this.
You
Makes
got
sense.
it.
Okay. So how
Yeah,
is
it's
different?
great that there are many organizations that deal with different aspects of the fight for Israel, and we cooperate with all of them. Memory and PMW, Palestine Media Watch, deal with monitoring Arabic media exclusively. So does an organization called Camera, which deals with media from around the world. And we strictly focus on American and British mainstream and social media in English. And we're a lot more aggressive than they are. Since I took over well, I can't do the math anymore, 18, 19 months ago, we've gotten 8 anti-Semitic Hitler and Hamas praising journalists fired or suspended around the world,
Wow.
including 3 from the New York Times, 2 from CNN, and 2 from the Associated Press. And including during this war, the beginning of the war, there was a guy writing for AP, Issam Adwan, who had written on his social media in English, not Arabic, that Israel needs to be destroyed. And AP, more people are getting the news from him, from this guy, than anybody else around the world. He's suspended pending an investigation that has not yet taken place. And then Suleiman Hiji, a guy that we got fired after the August 2022 war because he praised Hitler on a social media in Arabic. The New York Times took him back at the beginning of this war. They hired a Nazi to
Right.
help cover the war. And since we pointed that out as being problematic, there's not been a byline by him in the New York Times. And if you've seen our investigations of Gazan photographers that made their way across the border, well, after it was revealed that one of them was very close to Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, um, he was fired by both AP and CNN. And
Right.
the world would still be getting their news from these people, friends with Hamas and people who praise Hitler, if it wasn't for Honest Reporting and its supporters around the world.
Well, that's thank God that you're doing that. Yasher koach to be Ashkenazi, chazak u'baruch to be Sephardic. On that, we are all trying in certain ways, in different ways, um, to battle and to fight for our place here. And I say that not that we're in a war, but in a way we're in a war, and over here too, we're trying to in America, in the States, in Canada. Many people feel very threatened, and we're trying to. I'm having these conversations to help people navigate their way through this, and so many people are on social media doing what they can and writing, congressmen and all that. And I think we appreciate. I certainly appreciate what you're doing on that front. Sherry has one more question, and I wanted to get to wrap things up shortly. This charge of genocide by the International Court of Justice and by South Africa is outrageous, she says. South Africa condemned Israel 2 days after October 7th, and they welcomed the delegation from Hamas 3 weeks post October 7th. Seems like blood libel. Do you agree? And would you agree,
Yes.
irrespective of the outcome, the damage is done? Israel wants to be part of the world order, and this fallacious claim seems to be damaging.
Nope. I think we got to defend ourselves pretty well in the International Criminal Court. We could have tried to bypass it like we have in the past. And we said, no, this time we're going to take advantage of the platform and explain ourselves. And we did it very well. Justice is on our side. The truth is on our side. And though the ruling won't be on our side because the judges aren't on our side, it still was a good pulpit. And I mean, we're staying out of politics here, but we're very thankful to the Biden administration for supporting Israel during this war and not pressuring us to end it prematurely, even if they would have loved it if we had. And we value our bipartisan relationship that we have in America. And so the world order is that Biden administration was moving full speed ahead to normalize relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia on October 6th. Iran, which is the enemy of Israel and the United States, started a war the following day in order to stop that from happening. And once Hamas is prevented from ruling Gaza anymore, has been defeated in this war, that helps peace. That helps there be a normalization process between Israel and Saudi Arabia that will bring along Saudi allies in North Africa and the Middle East and Asia that will lead toward the end of the Arab-Israeli conflict as we know it, and then help the people of Gaza as well. It was supposed to bring in thousands of workers from Gaza to Israel, and that also has stopped, and we won't be able to trust them for a very, very long time. They led the infiltrations.
Yeah, I'm very optimistic about the Saudi Arabia track, and I really hope that the future. I think the future is very promising once we get through this very difficult and challenging. I don't want to say episode, but time. There's a question that Marnie Horish has, but it's related to my next question, and I'd like to conclude around here. I want to look to the future, and there's to what happens after the Gaza war, right? And you just talked about that. And there's a video that Honest Reporting put out as well about the day after. And I'd like to share my screen and let everyone watch that as well, if I can find it. There we go. Okay. So everyone, please pay attention to this video by Honest Reporting.
If you're following Israel's war against Hamas, you're probably asking, what will the Gaza Strip look like when it's over? Right now, we don't know the answer. But what we do know is that changes need to be made. For decades, UNRWA schools have indoctrinated Palestinian children with hatred. And after Hamas rose to power in 2006, the situation only got worse. While Israel can physically root out Hamas, can it also root out Hamas's dangerous ideology? Well, it turns out that there is historical precedence for this. After Germany's defeat in World War II, the Allies began a process known as denazification, in which Nazi war criminals were tried and brought to justice, and extremism and hate were removed from the school curriculums, among many other things. Today, many decades later, Germany is a far cry from the Germany of 1945. A similar thing happened after Israel and the United Arab Emirates signed the Abraham Accords in 2020. The UAE has seriously reformed its school curriculum, promoting peace rather than anti-Semitic conspiracies. This is in stark contrast to Egypt, which, despite making peace with Israel in 1979, continues publishing anti-Semitism in its media. It's worth noting that to this day, the peace between Egypt and Israel is considered a cold peace, while Israel's relationship with the UAE is a lot warmer. Change in Gaza can happen, but it will require the cooperation of the international community, the Arab world, and the Palestinian leadership. So what will Gaza look like after the war? We don't have a crystal ball, but what we do know is that it has to be better than Hamas.
Please explain a bit what does happen the day after, and also how does the media play a role in all of this, in sort of concluding where we are and looking to that optimistic, positive future?
What's going to happen is that there's going to be Arab and Muslim countries that have relations with Israel or are about to, in the case of Saudi Arabia, who will be involved in the temporary stewardship of Gaza until the Palestinian Authority is able to get their act together. You know, they're not going to come in on the coattails of the IDF, but United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, Egypt, Jordan, and Saudi Arabia can be involved in governing the civil affairs in Gaza at first, while Israel will have to continue to ensure that militarily it stays as safe as possible. We'll control every border for a little bit, and even if the world doesn't like that very much, because we have to. There's also going to have to be education. The word re-education sounds bad. So how about educational reconstruction? There, you know, UNRWA, as Rachel O'Donoghue, who you see in that video, she's not Jewish in any way. She is in a relationship with a Jewish woman, but she's not Jewish. So she's in Israel. But she points out UNRWA taught hate in their schools, and that they cannot be allowed to come back and govern Gaza and be in charge of education.
And in terms of the role of the media, it seems to me, I mean, that's part of what you're saying about education, but with the Abraham Accords, the countries like the Gulf states, I would imagine that their media narratives have changed, and they're generally more positive towards Israel. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, repeat the last part.
Oh, that the role that media can play, besides the legacy media here, that the education in, let's say, the Gulf states that have had that were part of the Abraham Accords, that there's a change in the education system there to make things more positive. But I would imagine that the media locally, that the information there has been changed to be a little bit more positive towards Israel. Is that correct?
I've been to Dubai and to Marrakesh, and it was welcomed very well. And so their media has done conferences together with the Jerusalem Post, and we've seen what a warm peace can be. And then Egypt and Jordan are starting to realize what they missed out on by not having their peace be a warm peace all these years. And it gives hope that when Abraham Accords expands to throughout the Middle East, that there'll be better days for them all. And we hope that the media, realizing that this is something so consensus, will help it move forward in a positive way.
I think we all hope for positive change in the near future. I want to thank Gil Hoffman, Executive Director of Honest Reporting, for joining us today. For those of you who don't know, Gil joined us from Israel. It is late over there. And so I'm very appreciative of that. Please do check out honestreporting.com on social media and on their website. And there's a note in the chat. Please check that out. Gil, thank you so much for joining us. And stay safe. We wish you well, and keep up the good work with Honest Reporting.
Thanks so much, Eyal. Thank you for the opportunity.